Three people who have followed Jackson's career closely, though from different vantage points. Steve Helling writes about celebrities for People magazine. He's in Orlando, Florida tonight. Alan Cross hosts a syndicated radio show, and he's also the curator of ExploreMusic.com. He's in Winnipeg. And Andrew Craig is a CBC radio host and an accomplished musician himself. He's in Toronto. Gentlemen, there's one thing that TV obits do, and it's condense 50 years of somebody's life into about 50 seconds. And I'm really struck as we see the young Michael Jackson dancing on the Ed Sullivan Show. He's this bright super child, then he morphs into this strange skeletal celebrity with the silk face mask on. Steve, what did superstardom do to this man?
Well, you have to realize that he became a superstar at such an early age. And you keep going through his career and you realize Thriller came out when he was 25 years old. So he had nowhere to go but down. And, you know, he was mourning his lost childhood. He was trying to recapture that. And so you saw the surgeries, you saw all this stuff happen, and it ruined him in the end.
Alan, you know, as Steve's saying, there's sort of no pre-stardom period in his life because he was already on stage at the age of 6. But there was a pre-Thriller period in his life. And if we look back to that period there, I mean, were there any signs at this point that he was going to be heading down this path?
I don't think so. You know, the Jackson 5 were a phenomenon of their own. And there was even the Saturday morning cartoon that was based on the life of the Jacksons.
I remember that.
And yeah, that was kind of cool for a lot of people because, you know, if you're growing up African American, suddenly you were seeing African American cartoon characters, something that was brand new, was very groundbreaking. And then Michael went solo. He had his golden period from about 1979 through to about 1987. And he couldn't do anything wrong during that time.
Andrew, what do you think propelled him down this strange path? Was it genius or was it narcissism?
I'm not sure if it was either. You know, Michael's path seems to be a unique combination of three factors. One, having such extraordinary prodigious talents that showed themselves so early. Two, coming into the industry at a time when it was really popular or possible for someone like him to achieve that level of stardom. The industry is no longer that way, and it's hard to imagine anybody could get to where he is. And third is the history of abuse that he had in his own family. So you put those three things together and you have somebody who unfortunately has to unravel publicly because that's the only way that all of these issues, the scars on his psyche, can manifest.
And boy, did he unravel publicly. Steve, I mean, was he using the media to build his profile or was the media feeding on him? I mean, which came first? Can you tell from your experience working at People?
Well, that's kind of a chicken and egg type of scenario. It's hard to say. You know, when he first hit the scene, all the press was really good. It was positive press. And so I think when the press started turning against him, which was definitely in 1993 with the first molestation accusations, I think he was shocked. I think he was stunned. He didn't know what to do at that point. And then from there on, you look at, and all of the press that he got from there on out was negative. And I don't think that he ever really came to terms with the fact that, you know, he wasn't untouchable anymore. Suddenly there was a chink in his armor and it got bigger and bigger and things got weirder and weirder. And that's when you started to see the feeding of things going on where the media would just pounce on any little thing he did.
Well, any little thing. I don't know if they were little in some cases. Alan, you've got this encyclopedic knowledge. I mean, do you remember some of the stunts he was pulling, at least PR stunts?
Well, there was, you know, the hyperbaric sleeping chamber, which apparently he leaked to the National Enquirer. There were the stories about him buying John Merrick's bones, the Elephant Man's bones. Those were two things that he may have actually perpetuated himself. Michael Jackson and the current modern celebrity tabloid media basically grew up together. I mean, I remember going back and reading some National Enquirer stories in the 80s, and they were all about, you know, Bigfoot. They were all about, you know, flying saucers and that kind of weirdness. But as you get into the 90s, with Michael Jackson and his relationship with Liza Minnelli, his relationship with Liz Taylor, his relationship with Bubbles the Chimp and all the other things, that's where you start to get the beginnings of modern celebrity paparazzi tabloid culture. And those two things just fed each other like crazy for, well, up until the time he died. And you know what? It's only going to get weirder as we go on because there's all these outstanding lawsuits that have never been settled. There's the whole issue of the 50 concerts in London. Who's going to pay for all the costs that were incurred there? How are they going to refund all the money? There's the fact that Jackson is in such was in terrible, terrible debt when he died. Is the estate going to be sued? Is the estate going to pull an Elvis, do a Graceland, and begin licensing everything Michael Jackson just so that they can, service this massive debt that he's managed to create over the last little while? He hasn't put out an album in 10 years, or in 8 years. He hasn't had a good album in 12 years. So there's not a lot of money left.
Well, you touch on a good point there, which is the quality of music. And Andrew, as this sort of weirdness grows, what was happening to the quality and the appeal of his music?
Well, appeal is a funny thing, right? Because when you look at celebrity musicians or high-profile musicians, especially in the modern context, there's no such thing as us evaluating someone's music without evaluating their character. I mean,
right.
their personalities are as public as the music that they put out. So given what we know about the way Michael's been portrayed in the press over the last 10, 12 years, it was almost impossible for him to have an album that was given critical acclaim, both by the public and by those who make a business of evaluating this kind of thing. It's pretty safe to say his zenith was long behind him from a musical standpoint, and he probably spent a good 15 years of his life just trying to reclaim the public's love.
Steve, there's something that I just don't get, because as I hear him described, as we look back on his life as an uncanny businessman, as a perfectionist in the studio, I'm trying to reconcile that guy with the guy who was wearing pajamas to his child molestation hearing. I mean, what happened, and how do you reconcile these two Michael Jacksons?
Well, there were two different Michael Jacksons, if you want to get down to it. There was a professional Michael, and there was the personal Michael. And sometimes they did come cross, and sometimes they didn't. And so he was actually very savvy at the beginning at knowing how to craft his image. A little bit of weirdness isn't necessarily bad. Buying the bones, the hyperbaric chamber, that stuff isn't bad, because it just kind of generates a little bit of press. It was once things started getting out of control professionally that you see that his personal life things also got out of control. So at that point, everything sort of dovetailed together, and then it was kind of a spiral that lasted for, really from 1993 on. He didn't have very many high points in the last 16 years.
Well, that's a good point. And one of the things, Alan, he had said he wanted to actually be able to outsell Thriller, which he never did. So in the end, was he a victim of his own success?
Listen, Thriller is going to be the high water mark for any record sales until the heat death of the universe. We are never going to see a single artist sell 50 or 60 million copies of a record. That album was the synthesis of so many different things when it came out in 1982. R&B, rock, pop, image, fashion, technology. I mean, people forget that Thriller helped sell a lot of stereo systems because the compact disc was released at the same time as Thriller. So how many billions of dollars of stereo systems were sold by people demonstrating the gear with the first 20 seconds of Billie Jean? He was never, ever going to have that perfect confluence of circumstances ever again. I think nobody will. It's just an era gone by.
And I think the history of Michael Jackson is yet to be written. So many stories that have come out. Andrew, Craig, last quick word to you. Which Michael Jackson will you remember?
I'm hoping that I'm certainly going to remember the musician. In time, I'm really hoping that the public looks back on his musical legacy, the legacy of a true genius, and that becomes our point of long-term focus. I think in the short term, however, the complexity of his character is going to dominate the airwaves.
I think you're right on that one. Guys, great talking to you tonight. Steve Helling in Orlando, Alan Cross in Winnipeg, Andrew Craig here in Toronto. Thank you.